Have you ever felt like you were living on autopilot, saying the right things, being agreeable, constantly explaining yourself so others wouldn't misread your silence as rejection? You smile when it's expected. You answer messages even when you're mentally exhausted. You nod when you want to scream. You shrink your truth to fit into conversations that aren't built to hold it. Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, why? Why do you feel the need to constantly be understood? There's something deeply unnerving about the silence that follows when you stop explaining yourself, when you choose to no longer participate in the emotional economy of reassurance, when you withdraw not as an act of aggression, but as an act of preservation. At first, it feels like self-sabotage. You imagine that people will pull away, that they'll misunderstand, that they'll accuse you of being cold, distant, arrogant, and maybe they will, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." Most people don't actually want to understand you. They want you to stay where you're easy to define, easy to predict, easy to manage. And the moment you start acting from your center rather than their expectations, you become a problem. This video isn't about isolation, it's about liberation. Because something strange happens when you stop trying to be understood. At first, there's tension, then panic, and then something else, stillness, power. People become anxious when they can't read you, when they can't place you neatly in the roles they've created in their minds. That discomfort they feel, that's not your responsibility. That's the space where their own projections start to crack. And in that space, you begin to see clearly. You begin to realize how many of your conversations were never about connection. They were performances, negotiations, emotional transactions designed to keep you liked. But what if being liked was never the point? What if being whole mattered more than being relatable? You see, we've been conditioned to believe that visibility equals safety, that to be known is to be protected. But there's a different kind of protection, a deeper one, that comes when you no longer depend on external validation to feel real. You become quiet, not empty, full of your own awareness, full of thoughts that no longer need to be shared to have value, full of presence that no longer begs to be witnessed to exist. And this is where the journey begins. Not in reaction, not in conflict, but in the deliberate refusal to be pulled out of yourself, in choosing not to be digestible to those who only value you when you're convenient. You're not here to be understood by everyone, you're here to understand yourself. That shift changes everything. Because when you stop explaining, you start observing. You begin to notice who still shows up when you no longer overextend. You begin to see who becomes uncomfortable when you're no longer trying to soften your truth for their comfort. You begin to notice the games, the subtle attempts to provoke you just to get a response, the emotional hooks disguised as concern, the guilt trips wrapped in compliments, the praise that only comes when you're useful. And suddenly, you're no longer confused. You're awake. This is where individuation truly starts. Not in the performance of being good or kind or pleasing, but in the radical act of returning to yourself without guilt. Because the truth is, being constantly understood is a kind of prison. To always be transparent is to always be vulnerable, and not everyone who sees you clearly wants the best for you. There's a sacredness in becoming unreadable, in reclaiming the parts of yourself that you used to offer to people who never valued them, in becoming less available, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. You don't owe everyone an explanation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is go silent, not as escape, but as revolution. To remove your energy from spaces that drain you, to remove your presence from dynamics that depend on your compliance, to remove your voice from conversations that never sought to hear it, only to shape it. And when you do, the environment changes. The people who depended on your over-explanation begin to flounder. The ones who fed off your guilt can no longer reach you. The world, which once demanded your availability, starts to whisper a different question. Not, "Where are you?" but "Who were you all along?" And now, the real work begins. In the next part, we'll explore how the need to be understood keeps you trapped in the illusion of control, and why embracing the unknown side of yourself is the gateway to true freedom. Stay with me. Most people don't want peace. They want predictability, familiarity, reassurance that the world and the people in it will keep behaving according to the stories they've written in their heads. And that includes you. When you suddenly stop reacting, when you stop explaining, softening, entertaining, people start to panic. Not because you've done something wrong, but because they can no longer control the narrative. They start to call you cold, difficult, distant. Not because you are, but because you're no longer playing the role that made them feel safe. That role was never about you. It was about their projection of you, their idea of who you should be. And here's the hard truth. The longer you stay in roles built by others, the more you lose access to who you really are. Carl Jung spoke often of the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we repress or deny in order to survive in a world that rewards masks more than authenticity. And many of us have built our entire identities around these masks. You became the nice one because it kept you safe. You became the strong one because no one else could be trusted to be. You became the understanding one because conflict terrified you. But now you're tired. Not because you're weak, but because your soul is suffocating beneath the weight of who you pretend to be. The need to be understood, at its root, is often just a fear of being abandoned. Because if they don't understand you, they might leave. If they misunderstand you, they might stop loving you. If they don't get you, they might reject you. And so you explain, and justify, and overcorrect again and again. But all you're really doing is negotiating with your own fear, trading your authenticity for temporary approval. And that's a bad deal. Every time you explain your boundaries to someone who only wants to cross them, you teach them that your no is negotiable. Every time you justify your silence to someone who only values your attention, you reinforce the lie that you owe access to everyone who demands it. And slowly, piece by piece, you start to vanish. You wonder why you feel exhausted, disconnected, bitter. It's because your energy has been hijacked by people who only ever saw you as a source of something. Validation, entertainment, support. Not as a being with sacred limitations. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That unconscious urge to be seen, to be validated, to be understood at all costs, that's not fate. That's conditioning, trauma. Survival instincts from a time when rejection truly did feel like death. But you are not that child anymore. You are no longer required to be understandable, in order to be worthy. You can choose to be whole instead of understood. And that choice is terrifying because it means letting go of control. You start to notice who only loves you when you're explainable, who only stays close when you're convenient, who only respects you when you're accommodating. And in that clarity, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop trying to convince people of your worth, and you start acting like it's self-evident. You stop explaining your needs, and you start honoring them, whether anyone else understands them or not. You stop asking for permission to be complex, to be unpredictable, to evolve, because you realize understanding is not a prerequisite for love, and if it is, then what they love isn't really you. So many of us spend years trying to be loved for who we are, while simultaneously hiding who we are so we can be loved. That contradiction will eat you alive. There is no peace in being understood if the version of you they understand is a watered-down replica. There is no love in being accepted for a role you're exhausted from playing. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be whole, and wholeness isn't tidy. It isn't always digestible. It doesn't explain itself on demand. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it disappears completely, not to punish, but to recalibrate. The more you grow, the more you'll find that being misunderstood is not a punishment. It's a byproduct of becoming real. The more real you become, the fewer people will recognize you. That's not a sign that you've lost yourself. It's a sign that you've stopped being who you never were. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the energetic cost of maintaining the illusion and how reclaiming your psychic energy changes your very presence in the world. Don't go back to shrinking. Let the misunderstanding come. Carl Jung didn't see the human psyche as a mechanical structure, something to be fixed or optimized. He saw it as an energy system, living, fluid, always in motion. And, like any energy system, it can be drained, it can be wasted, it can be misdirected. The question isn't whether you're powerful. The question is, where is your power going? Every message you answer out of obligation, every argument you enter just to prove your point, every situation you try to fix that never asked to be healed, every time you explain yourself to someone who already decided not to understand you, that's psychic energy, leaking, spilling, dissolving into nothing. And that's why you feel heavy, not because life is inherently hard, but because your internal system is overloaded by 100 tiny invisible demands that aren't aligned with who you are becoming. You keep reacting, keep responding, keep showing up in places that drain you, and then wonder why you feel disconnected from your own life. You've been taught that being available is admirable, that being responsive is responsible, that to pause, to delay, to protect your own time is selfish. But no one taught you the cost. Because while you were being generous with your attention, People were being strategic with theirs. They only call when they need something. They only ask how you are when they sense you're pulling away. They only check in to make sure you're still within arm's reach. They know your patterns better than you do. And if your pattern is to respond immediately, to explain your silence, to justify your absence, then that becomes your trap, a cage you willingly reinforce. Jung said, "What you resist not only persists but will grow in size." But here's another layer to that. What you unconsciously serve begins to rule you. When you keep giving your energy to the same people, the same problems, the same emotional patterns, you start living on a loop. Your life becomes a recycling bin of unresolved feelings and repetitive reactions, and that's not life, that's a trance. But the moment you become conscious of this energy leakage, everything starts to shift. You realize you don't have to explain why you're unavailable. You don't have to respond just because someone reached out. You don't have to fix discomfort the moment it arises. You can sit in the tension. You can let people wonder. You can let the phone ring, and nothing will collapse, except the illusion that you owe anyone your energy simply because they want it. This is where the reclaiming begins, not in loud declarations or severing ties overnight, but in small, powerful decisions that say, I no longer spend energy explaining myself to people who have already shown they don't want to understand. And something fascinating happens when you make this shift. You become less visible to those who used you, less reachable, less readable, less responsive, but strangely more magnetic, because energy, when conserved, becomes presence. You walk into a room and people notice, not because you're loud, but because you're self-contained. Your energy no longer leaks out in every direction, so it draws others in. You stop being the emotional fire extinguisher, the late-night therapist, the go-to fixer, and people start to realize that your attention is no longer guaranteed, and that terrifies them. Because when your energy becomes selective, it becomes valuable. And when something is valuable, people have to earn it. But those who never intended to will complain. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're distant, unavailable, unkind. Let them. Because the truth is, when you reclaim your energy, you reveal who was connected to your essence and who was only connected to your service. You don't need to argue. You don't need to defend. You just need to observe and preserve. Let your boundaries speak for you. Let your silence clarify everything your words never could. You are not cold. You are no longer leaking. And that difference will make some people deeply uncomfortable. But that discomfort is not yours to manage. You're not here to soothe everyone else's anxiety at the expense of your own life force. You're here to build a self that no longer runs on reactivity, but on awareness. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the psychological mechanics of emotional manipulation and how your withdrawal disarms the very systems that once fed off your availability. Because your absence isn't just silence, it's strategy. There's a strange discomfort that creeps into the room when you don't react the way people expect you to. You don't argue. You don't defend. You don't explain yourself. You simply withdraw. And suddenly, they don't know what to do with you anymore. That silence, that absence, it breaks their rhythm. It disorients their control, not because you're being aggressive, but because you've removed the one thing they relied on the most, your predictable reaction. Carl Jung called it projection, the unconscious act of assigning our own disowned feelings, fears, and desires onto others. But here's what no one tells you. When you are always emotionally available, you become the perfect screen for other people's projections. You become the blank wall they throw their shadows against. They're not arguing with you. They're arguing with the version of you that lives inside their head. And when you refuse to play along, the illusion cracks. Suddenly they have to face their own discomfort, their own chaos, their own unhealed wounds. And not everyone is ready for that. That's when the accusations start. You've changed. You're distant. You're cold. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer performing the version of you that made me feel in control. Because for a long time, your emotional availability allowed them to avoid doing their own inner work. They could trigger you, they could guilt trip you, they could rely on you to fill the silence with explanations. But now, that silence belongs to you, and in that silence, something ancient and powerful begins to stir: your sovereignty. Jung warned that people unconsciously seek to manage their inner conflicts by projecting them outward. They create emotional scapegoats, people who absorb their anxiety so they don't have to face it. And if you've always been emotionally responsive, chances are you've been the scapegoat more times than you realize. It's subtle, it's quiet, it's psychological. You get blamed for their mood swings. You're told you're too sensitive when you point out inconsistencies. You're asked to apologize for things that weren't yours to carry. You're shamed for needing space, for saying no, for being unavailable. But here's the truth. They were never in relationship with you. They were in relationship with their need for you. And that's not love, that's utility. That's why your unavailability is so threatening. It's not because you're hurting anyone. It's because you're no longer serving a role they quietly depended on. Your silence leaves them face to face with themselves. They'll bait you, provoke you, stir old wounds just to get a spark, because a reaction, any reaction, is better than silence. Even if you yell, even if you cry, even if you explode, it's still proof that you're emotionally reachable. But when you don't respond, when you simply hold your center, remain still, unbothered, grounded, that's when the game ends. Because now, they're no longer in control of the script. They can't predict the next line. They can't use your emotions to anchor their instability. And that scares them. But it frees you. Because suddenly you realize how many of your relationships were really just performance contracts. Unspoken agreements that said, I'll keep pretending to be what you need if you keep pretending to value me. But pretending costs energy. And now you're done paying. Let them be confused. Let them spin. Let them wrestle with your absence. That's not cruelty. That's truth. Your withdrawal is not a punishment. It's a diagnosis, a revelation, a mirror they didn't ask for. And the ones who are ready, truly ready, will reflect on that mirror instead of smashing it. They'll do the work. They'll question their projections. They'll grow. But most won't. And that's okay. You're not responsible for the inner journey of others. You're responsible for protecting your own. And in that protection, a new kind of strength is born. Not loud, not aggressive, but untouchable. In the next part, we'll explore the sacred power of silence, not as passivity, but as strategy. You'll learn why your quiet presence is more commanding than any argument, and why silence terrifies those who no longer have access to your inner world. Stay grounded. In a world obsessed with noise, with constant reaction, with ceaseless chatter, silence is a rebellion. But it's not the silence of avoidance, not the silence of fear, not the silence of giving up. It's the silence of choice, the silence that says, I will not be drawn into chaos today. The silence that holds space for your own healing. The silence that protects your energy like a fortress. When you cultivate this kind of silence, something shifts inside and outside. You become a presence that commands attention without demanding it. You become a mystery, an enigma, a force that cannot be owned or predicted. Because silence is not emptiness. It's a concentrated energy. It's the still point in the storm, the pause before the next move, the quiet that makes the world lean in closer. And this is what makes it terrifying for others. They are used to your availability, your explanations, your defenses, your reactions. They are used to your energy being an open tap, pouring out whenever they reach for it. But when that tap closes, when your silence deepens, they lose their hold. Suddenly, they're forced to face their own noise, their own discomfort, their own shadows. And silence exposes what words often try to hide. Your silence is a boundary carved out in the language of energy. It says, "This is mine. This is where I begin and you end." It is the purest form of self-respect, because when you are silent, you no longer argue for your value. You simply are. You no longer justify your absence. You no longer explain your boundaries. You no longer negotiate your peace. You hold your ground without aggression or apology, and in doing so, you reclaim the power that was quietly siphoned away by endless emotional transactions. Remember, the loudest voices are not always the strongest. The most reactive people are not always the most powerful. True power is measured in stillness, in the ability to be present without being pulled off balance. When you master this kind of silence, you no longer react to the world. You create your world, and the world responds. People begin to respect your time because you respect it first. They begin to honor your presence because you honor yourself. They begin to value your energy because you value it above all else. But be warned, this path isn't easy. Silence makes you visible in a way noise never can. It reveals your depth, your authenticity, and sometimes it reveals the fractures others hoped to ignore. Some will withdraw from you, others will challenge you, some will accuse you of being unreachable or cold. Let them, because the cost of your silence is their discomfort, and their discomfort is not your burden. You are not here to soothe everyone's fears. You are here to protect your soul. So start small. Pause before answering. Sit with discomfort instead of rushing to fix it. Say no without guilt. Turn off your phone without apology. Practice the sacred art of conscious unavailability. It is not selfishness, it is sovereignty. And it is the gateway to a life where your energy belongs to you and only you. In the next part, we will dive into the transformation that follows, how solitude becomes your ally, how loneliness evolves into strength, and how true freedom is found in the courage to stand alone. Stay with me. When you choose to become unavailable, a new world opens, but it begins with a silence that can feel heavy. You may feel alone, isolated, misunderstood. This loneliness isn't a punishment, it's a passage. Carl Jung described this as the necessary solitude of individuation, the sacred journey toward wholeness. It's not the loneliness of emptiness, but the solitude of presence. It is the moment when you stop running from yourself to chase connection. When you stop bending to fit others' expectations and start standing tall in your truth. At first, this solitude feels like loss. You may mourn the people who drift away, the comfort of constant interaction, the easy roles you once played. But gradually, solitude reveals its gifts. In that space free from distraction, you hear yourself again. You reconnect with your desires, your fears, your shadows, and your light. You learn to sit with your own company unafraid. You begin to build a relationship with yourself that is unbreakable and true. And this is the foundation of real freedom. Because when you no longer need external approval, you become unshakable. You no longer live to fill others' expectations or to avoid their judgments. You live to honor your essence. This strength is quiet but profound. It does not seek validation. It does not demand attention. It simply is. You become a force of nature, not by dominating others, but by mastering yourself. And the world will notice. Some will be drawn closer by your authenticity. Others will recoil, because your light exposes their own shadows. But that is the cost of growth. And it is worth every moment of discomfort. When you reclaim your energy, set boundaries, and walk the path of conscious unavailability, you enter a new phase of life, one where your presence is a gift, not a given, where your silence speaks louder than words, where you are no longer shaped by the noise of the world, but by the clarity of your inner voice. If this message resonates with you, if you feel the stirrings of this transformation, know that you are not alone. This is a journey many fear to take, but it is the only path to true sovereignty. In the final part, we will explore practical steps to cultivate this power daily, how to protect your energy, embrace your solitude, and live unapologetically as your authentic self. Stay with me. The transformation is just beginning. You've heard the why, the deep psychology, the costs and rewards of becoming emotionally unavailable, not as coldness, but as strength. Now comes the how. How do you begin living this new way? How do you practice conscious unavailability every day? How do you protect your energy in a world designed to drain it? Start small. Create sacred boundaries. Decide where your energy ends and others begins. Say no without guilt. Say yes only when it truly aligns with your peace. Practice the pause. Before you respond, whether to a text, a call, or an emotional trigger, take a breath. Give yourself space to choose your reaction instead of reacting automatically. Limit your availability. Set times when you are truly off. Turn off notifications. Disconnect without apology. Your time is your sanctuary. Choose your circle wisely. Surround yourself with those who respect your boundaries and value your presence, not just your availability. Reclaim your silence. Let silence be your ally. Use it to observe, to heal, to recharge. Remember, silence is not absence, it is amplified presence. Embrace solitude. Spend time alone, not as punishment, but as nourishment. Rediscover your true self in that sacred space. Refuse to explain yourself. You owe no one your justifications. Your absence, your no, your silence, they speak louder than words ever could. Remember, these practices aren't selfish, they are essential, because your energy is your most valuable currency. Protect it, honor it, and watch how your life transforms. People will begin to see you differently. They will respect your time. They will seek your presence, not your permission. You will no longer be the emotional default for others. You will be sovereign. You will be whole. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is your invitation to step off the exhausting cycle of reaction and availability, to choose yourself first, to become the mystery that commands respect, to live free. So now I ask you, Are you ready? Ready to be misunderstood, to be alone, to be strong? If your answer is yes, write in the comments, "I choose my peace." Let's see how many of us are ready to reclaim our power. Thank you for being here. If this video helped you, subscribe and join the journey. More is coming. Remember, your silence is not absence, it is power.